Think I see a fair amount of people here have started to come in, so I'll go ahead and kick off this webinar here. So thanks everyone for joining in today. I'm excited to take you through this webinar. We're going to be joined here with Aileen, which she'll introduce herself here shortly. But in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on a crucial tool for protecting your rental income and simplifying the eviction process. As always, our goal is to empower our property owners and managers to make the best possible decisions while also saving them the most valuable resource, which they can, which is their time. So we're going to introduce to you Eviction Shield. It's pretty much a service designed that we've created here in the last year and a half, 2 years, to safeguard your rentals, provide legal support. We're also going to hear in from Aileen here as well, who's a legal law attorney. And then we're going to also show you some examples of how, she's seen eviction on her end and on how we can also help in on our end. So as well as managing late payments and potential evictions can be stressful and time consuming. So our eviction shield process kind of streamlines that, ensuring you get expert guidance from our team every step on the way, as well as helping you avoid the costly mistakes and unnecessary delays. So we appreciate you guys joining us here. And a special thank you to all those who registered before for our other webinars. Your insights have helped make this the best decision we've made in the last 2 years here with our products. And I'm just going to now go to the next page. I'm just going to have the agenda shown, and then I'll introduce myself really quickly and then let Aileen kick off herself as well. So we've broken down this presentation into these 6 parts. We're just going to do the welcome and introductions on our end. We're going to show how Hemlane approaches past due rent. Aileen's going to kick it off what happens when an eviction is required, as well as understanding legal rights and best practices. And then requesting services, I'll kind of walk you through how it looks like on Hemlane's end, any restrictions and so forth of how to use our service, or maybe if the service is not best suited for you. And then we'll have at the end, we'll have some live questions and answers where myself and Aileen will go ahead and help out with that. And so, yeah, with a quick introduction on my end, I'm Leon. I'm a service manager here at Hemlane. I've been in this role now for ongoing 3 years, and pretty much my whole job is just making improvements on our product, making sure that the owners and the users who use our services have the best experience and how we can more cater to them in this ever-growing tech-enabled landscape. And then, Aileen, if you want to introduce yourself for a couple of minutes here, go ahead and I'll let you take the stage.
Sure. Good morning. I am Eileen Kendall. I am the owner of Kendall Law. We are a full service real estate litigation firm. About 75% of our practices is representing property management companies as well as mom and pop owners that maybe own 1, 2, 3, 4, or a handful of properties, navigating all of the various laws. We are located in Southern California, so our focus is Southern California, Los Angeles in particular, and we handle from anything from just questions with regarding to the rental and the lease and issues that are ongoing through the eviction all the way to judgment post-lockout.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aileen. And I'm going to jump here to the next slide. This is just kind of a question for all of the attendees. You guys are going to have the chat option open there. So just a question. So how many eviction cases are filed by owners each year? I just kind of want to see the responses from everyone. So take a moment, drop your guesses in the chat. I'll give everyone a couple seconds to just put in their chat and see what the actual numbers are. $1 million, that's a really good guess. 10,000. Yeah, you guys are really on the ball there. So actually, the actual number, let me skip to the next slide here. Our actual number is 1.2 million. So I'll go back to the previous slide. So we actually got this. It's 1.16 million over in 2024. And so it's a staggering figure, and it really kind of highlights the challenges landlords face. More importantly, it reinforces why having the right support in place is crucial to avoid the eviction process. And so just in case anyone's curious, we got this number from evictionlab.org, and they pretty much post every year They'll post the amount of eviction cases filed by owners as well as in the specific states. So if you ever are interested in seeing what states have higher than usual, eviction cases, you can go ahead and take a look at that. In which case, this kind of jumps into the next part of how does Hemlane approach the service if there's so many eviction cases filed each year. So I'm just kind of going to go through how Hemlane thinks about the process. So this is just kind of a general overview, but Hemlane kind of thinks about the process in terms of late rent is detected, mediation attempts, notice preparation and delivery, follow-up mediation attempts, ongoing status updates, and then eviction filing as a last resort. And so I'll break down into each of these what that generally means, but I'll just kind of a quick overview for the first part of late rent detected. How is late rent detected in Hemlane, right? So late rent is Hemlane alerts you and logs the issue. So for example, when you have a tenant that's past due, let's say, or the rent is due on the first, you'll have notifications sent out prior to the first, a couple days before, and then a week before to alert the tenant that, hey, as a reminder, let's say $1,000 is due at the start of the month. So once that's passed up, it'll show up on your dashboard as well there as past due rent. And so if you are again enrolled in our services, that's when it kind of kicks off on our end. And what'll happen is I will jump to the next slide, mediation. And so I think what is an example of our mediation services? So the request will populate onto our dashboard as well as your dashboard, and it'll show up, which I'll showcase later as an example, but it'll show up with the property address, how much is past due, and which tenant it is. And so our team will kind of see that and start our first step of a process, which is mediation. So we have certified mediators who will work with the tenant to understand why they're late on rent, and then we'll relay this information over to you for any decision making. At the end of the day, us, Hemlane, we are obviously not the property owners and managers. So we'll relay over that information to you and let you know what's going on. Obviously, sometimes tenants will have something that have come up during that last month, maybe loss of a job, a family member who's passed away, and so forth. And so, excuse me, we'll pass on that information to you. At the end of the day, if you choose to want to be lenient and give them a grace period, that decision will fall on your end. So the number one question for Hemlane's mediation is, what did my tenant say? Or what did Hemlane say as well? And so we took this seriously in the last year here, and we had updates where now you can see the messages that we sent to the tenants as well as the messages you get. And so they're two different chats. And so the one on the tenant side is read only, which means you can't jump in because the whole point of our services too, of how we approach the eviction process is that we're here to help and we want to separate. We want to put a barrier in between the communication of you guys and the tenant. And so we'll step in the middle. We'll take all the information and pass it along to you, as well as you can see all the messages we send to the tenants, and then you can see all the messages that we send to you as well with the updates. So there are various different outcomes for the information we receive, and we relay this over to you at the end of the day. So they will pay rent immediately, and maybe they weren't checking the emails or thought it was auto pay. Whatever the case may be, we'll let you know. The decision again lies in your hands if you want to continue with the next process or if you want to give them the leniency of like, hey, you know what, we lost our job. We'll make payment next Friday. And so then let's say this part doesn't work, our first step, our mediation. What'll happen in the next steps? We like to put a lot of our efforts into mediation as well as having our certified mediators because it's the non-adversarial approach to resolving disputes between landlords and tenants without going to court, right? So Aileen will talk about it later, but going to court is pretty much your last step. You want to be able to go through these steps to avoid having to go to the court because obviously court is expensive and sometimes also time consuming. And so in mediation, parties have more control over the outcome and can work together to craft creative solutions that may meet the specific needs and concerns, which may not be possible in a court setting with rigid legal remedies. And so our next step here is legal notices. So what are legal notices? So our notices are pretty much the notices that are drafted up for notice to pay a rent. So if a tenant is past due, we'll create a lease base or we'll create a notice based off the lease provided. We'll always need that lease. So if that mediation is not successful and we move on to this next step, then we'll work with the local process server to create a no to serve a notice to pay or quit in person. And so this will be done through that process server. They'll go ahead and make their attempts. In most states, it's going to be 3 to 4 attempts unless they've able to make contact with the tenant during those first couple, in which case then it'll be uh, posted to the door if not. And so that notice, what it'll do is it'll request the tenant to make full payment towards their balance or vacate the property. So state depending, as I was mentioning before, our process server will complete those 4 attempts over 10 days. That's our quota here. It's 10 business days or 10 days to physically serve the tenants or other remaining at the home. So serving a notice to pay or quit is the first step in any formal eviction process. It's important that this notice is prepared and served within the state laws, or a judge may require you to restart the process. And so Hemlane's teams and partners are well versed in many markets and in work ensuring that you have a bulletproof shield if you do need to attend court. So our notices are drafted based on the lease. So as long as the lease information is correct, and the notices are state specific. So if it's a specific one like, Ohio or California, which has a little bit more rigid, we'll make sure to follow those processes to a T and make sure that going into the next step, everything's done correctly. And so what happens after our general overview of our first step mediation, second step legal notices, our third step is where we kick in here, and that is attorney referrals. And what are our attorney referrals? So if the eviction needs to be taken further, our team will guide you through the next steps and introduce you to local attorneys that will represent you. And in this case, obviously, Aileen is joining us today, so she'll be able to touch base on this after. But although less than 2% of all of our cases end in attorney referral, our team can assist you with escalating the request to an attorney in your area who helps with local landlord and tenant law. So we recommend flat rate over hourly, as we find that hourly will cost more in the end. But again, depending on the situation, certain law firms will have like a set cost for taking it to court. So for the Hemlane recommended attorneys, we ask that we always want to know how the process ends. That's why we ask for feedback from each customer and have an internal database with attorney reviews, cost, and turnaround times. So I know people can find it quite intimidating to review an attorney online, so our database tends to have more detailed and accurate information on how the attorney is. So Aileen will go into the next part here, but tenants obviously have rights, and so including the right to habitat, to have habitable living conditions, the right to withhold rent in certain circumstances, and a protection from retaliatory eviction for reporting housing code violations or organizing with other tenants, which the attorney will be able to give you specific information should you have any questions about that. But this is kind of our final step in where Hemlane steps out because we're unable to represent you guys in court and or go. So what our final step is we'll refer the attorneys. It is on your end where you'll have to reach out to the attorneys. We'll give you a list of usually 2 to 3, more depending on the scenario. You can choose which one best fits your needs, which ones have the availability to take it on right away. You'll reach out to them, set up the appointment, and we'll just make sure that we follow up with you. And if you need any support during the way of like documentation and so forth. Otherwise, I'll switch over here to the next slide, which is what happens when an eviction is required. And I'll let Aileen go ahead and take over this next slide.
All right. Good morning. Again, my name is Eileen Kendall. Just for clarification and some points, I am only licensed in the state of California. So anything that I talk about today is going to be related to the state of California, and particularly in Los Angeles County. So if you're in another state, because I see that there's some questions already in the chat about different states, I do not represent anything outside of the state of California. And so in the eviction process, can kind of give you some real world case scenarios of a couple of cases that we've recently had. And if you are outside of California, you're probably not aware of the crazy protections that are in place in every city and every county. And so when I talk about single family versus multifamily, that is for a purpose, is because there are exclusions for single family, where a lot of the multifamily are protected by various just cause rent cap type protections. So imagine renting a single family home to a family with a monthly rent of about $87.50 and they stop paying rent. So for the first few months, there's promises that that the money is coming, but it never comes. So you didn't really do anything because you were hoping that it was going to work out. And you go to one of the eviction firms advertised and they file a lawsuit, but nothing gets filed. So there are what we call in California eviction mills. They are the big bulk services that it's about volume. So they charge lower costs and it's just about getting the files in the door, but you never have the same attorney. They send appearance attorneys to court, and they're very known for continuing the cases out and not getting it done. So on a referral, it came to our office. In the matter of 36 days, we were able to get possession and a judgment for $72,263.10. What's what we do to differentiate ourselves from those other firms that charge a lower flat rate and are about volume is that we are legal services with a personal touch. We take our files. We have myself that handles the files. We have a trial attorney, Alice, who handles some of the, or all of the trials, especially the jury trials. And we also have another associate, Tom. We have a couple of paralegals. We have a whole team. And when you're assigned a file, when you bring in a file and a file comes in, you're assigned a team. We're about communication. And it really makes a difference when you have a property that is not performing. You don't want to go to a firm that is going to just delay the process and it takes 6 to 9 to 12 months on a simple case where in this one we were able to do it in 36 days. Another instance is we had a client that had a tenant that was 8 months in arrears. It was a small amount of rent, but it was a pro per tenant, which means that they were representing themselves, and it was in the city of Los Angeles, which makes it even doubly, triply, quadruply more challenging. And he tries to derail the case by filing dozens and dozens of irrelevant motions and other documents that we have no choice but to respond to and requested a jury trial because in the state of California, it is a right for a tenant to have a jury trial, even on a non-payment of rent case. So even despite the tactics and a 7-day jury trial, we were able to obtain possession in just over 6 months, as well as all the past due rent. So that's kind of the worst case scenario. We do have some files that linger longer depending on the types of issues, but we try to get things done within that 90-day range on the regular matters, but more likely you're looking at for like particularly a jury trial that is more challenging in 6 months, where other firms can take, in my understanding, the 6 months to over a year in doing so. And even though they may be a flat rate firm, they are charging for services that they may not have disclosed, or it ends up being more cost efficient to do something with our office on an hourly basis. Next slide, I guess. Okay. So as I kind of mentioned, California is a crazy state. Landlords are very limited. You are required to maintain a habitable premises. Landlords have to ensure that they're providing required notices and disclosures. And that is crazy. In every city, it's a little bit different, and they have to be posted and they have to be provided. And some have to be provided when a notice is given, and some have to be provided when the actual complaint is served. And if that is none of those things are done, it's fatal to your case. Improper rent increases, particularly in Southern California in the city of LA, if you've done an improper rent increase, it then creates a bad accounting, and you can overstate your 3-day notice to pay or quit. Landlords must have just cause in most cities in California to evict. You can't evict just because you want them out. There's also requirements if there's no fault and it's a just cause, that relocation has to be paid. And again, you have to be careful of where your property is and knowing what your rent increase can be so that you don't overstate it. Where tenants' rights are very, very broad in California. Tenants can withhold rent if a landlord fails to maintain those habitable premises. They have a right to sue a landlord for monetary damages, attorney's fees, and punitive damages. There's more time to respond now. They increased it from 5 to 10 days recently. There's rights for reasonable accommodations. If there is a reasonable accommodation request that can delay an eviction. Now, in certain cities, they have access to free legal counsel, and they have to be given notice of that right to that legal counsel. They have access to education on their rights, where landlords are left out in the dark, and there's not a lot of education opportunities for landlords. And unfortunately, the smallest mistake will result in a favorable outcome for a tenant, because California is very landlord tenant friendly, landlord adverse. Next slide. So just quick in California, a few of the most important 2025 legislative updates is security deposit documentation. Mandatory photographic evidence before move-in and after move-out for deductions is required. Positive rent reporting for properties that are 15 and more units. There are new rules and regulations charging and refunding tenant screening fees. Again, your rent cap enforcement is annual rent increases capped at 10%, 5% plus CPI, whichever is lower. Then there are other cities that have even lower, like 3% or 2%. And then there's a junk fees legislation proposed bill to require all rental costs to be disclosed upfront, prohibiting additional charges during tenancy. Next. Southern California specific, is if you're not from Southern California, maybe you did or maybe you didn't hear of the major fires that we had in the Palisades. That's created a state of emergency where there are now price gouging laws that are limited to 10% during these declared emergencies. Our local ordinances like Los Angeles, Santa Ana, and San Diego have additional rent control measures that are in place. And the market dynamics or high demand areas can see increased scrutiny on compliance and tenants' rights, especially with those wildfire impacts. That is really something that's majorly heavy right now. So in general, and this is not necessarily California specific, is best practices for compliance is making sure you're doing thorough screening of tenants, maintaining detailed records of communications and transactions, clearly outline all rights, obligations, fee, and charges in your lease agreement. Take classes and seminars, understand the laws, especially in if you're outside of California. This was California specific, so knowing what your regulations are in other states. I know I see more and more states enacting just cause provisions, and you want to be aware of those. Conducting regular inspections, conducting periodic property inspections with proper notice to tenants is so important. I have people that come and, oh, I haven't been in the property in 10 years and I see it and it's a mess. If you were doing those things on a yearly basis, you're more inclined to find issues that can be resolved quickly before they escalate. And tenant communication. That is really big, is fostering open and respectful communication channels with your tenants, taking care of your repair requests timely, and yearly lease reviews for updates to disclosures and notices. Hemlane is going to be the one that's, if you use their services, that are going to be able to help make sure that these best practices are monitored and actually enacted. But that is the way to avoid nasty evictions and issues with non-payment of rent.
Sweet. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, guys, super important too. Just because I know Aileen was saying here, this is specific for California, but the practices are the ones we use here and that she's mentioning is something that you should be doing for regardless of where your property is, right? Speaking to your tenants, making sure that you take a look at the property, taking care of the repair requests in a timely manner. You don't want to delay those things. Those are not something that is just specific for California, but this is just general practices of how to ensure the best relationship you have with your tenants. And so I'm going to jump in on the next slide just with some of our results on Hemlane's end, because this is kind of something that we all know Hemlane helps out with, obviously repair coordination, tenant communication, and so forth. And so our results. So this is just some stats from our last year here at 2024. And so 90% of our cases have been resolved through mediation. And just as I was mentioning earlier, it's super, super important to have mediation done, right? Because a lot of things, in our opinion here, can be resolved with just good open communication with the tenants. Sometimes tenants fall behind. That's just kind of the way of life. And so having that there where we jump in and we're like, hey, you know what? We understand that you're going through something. Let's take a look with your management and see if they're okay with delaying this payment for a week and so forth. So we've recovered in just the year of 2024, 800,000 rent for owners. And we've resolved about 98% of our cases without court. So only 2% of our cases in the last year have had to have eviction services needed where legal counsel was needed. On average, we're about 2 to 3 weeks to resolve delinquency. Though some can be resolved really quickly, some can maybe take a little bit more time depending on the situation. Um, what we've noticed here at Hemlane as well, the average cost of eviction for property owners typically ranges anywhere in between 1,000 to 3,000. However, our services, provide kind of immediate savings upon sign up just because, we hope that in this case, most of the issues are resolved without having to go to court. That's where a lot of the extra costs add up over time. And so I'll jump into the next slide here just of how to request services. And then once we're done with requesting services, we'll go into some other slides here. So requesting services. So we have two options here at Hemlane. And so I'll go through both of them. So again, some of these might not work for you depending on which one you prefer. So we have Eviction Shield one time and then Eviction Shield recurring. So Eviction Shield one time is designed for when a tenant is already delinquent, providing our expert guidance and support through the eviction process. And that's a one-time cost of 475 per unit per property. So if it's one tenant at one unit, it's just going to be that 475. And then our other thing is Eviction Shield, where it's a monthly subscription, where it's $4.95 a month. A door covers all properties. Just so everyone knows, the Eviction Shield, the monthly subscription is applied to all units. So let's say you have 2 units, 10 units, 24 units. The Eviction Shield has to be applied to all of them. It's not simply you can choose a couple properties. It's for all of them. And then, like I said, the Eviction Shield, the one time, where it's simply if you just have one user who you're like, oh, I have 12 units, only one is delinquent, and they've already been delinquent for 2 months and you want it to take over, then it's that one-time fee of that $475. Both of them involve the tenant mediation, the legal notices that I've talked about, and the attorney referrals. Again, the only difference is one is a one-time in terms of if you have a specific tenant that's already been delinquent and so forth, if you want us to jump in, while Eviction Shield is any of the properties moving forward. So if you have that 12 properties, anything during those 12 properties, once we've taken over, we'll go ahead and assist with that. And so another thing to note too is that we only currently deal with our Eviction Shield services on past due delinquency. So we don't kind of help and assist with any sort of lease violations, such as like noisy complaints. We'll definitely can send a message as a courtesy to the tenant to let them know, but we currently only, if our Eviction Shield services are only helping with past due rent and so forth. And that's where the attorneys as well that we have for the attorney referrals, they help with the past due rent and so forth. Though they can help you with the other issues, our service just kind of helps in with the past due rent. So how does it look like getting started and how do you request those services? So to enroll, you're going to go to the services tab in your Hemlane dashboard, and that's going to be on the left-hand side there. And so I've attached a screenshot here so you guys can take a look. And what it'll look like is you'll select Eviction Shield, and then you'll click Get Eviction Shield, and then it'll go ahead and go through the steps of adding those, let's say 2, 10, 12 units or whatever it may be, and you'll be able to enroll in that. If it's a one-time service request, it'll go through the same steps, except you'll have to press on the one unit, or if you have any questions during that, you can always email us as well. And that just notices@hemlane.com, which I'll put at the very end as well. And so now how do you enroll into Eviction Shield? So this is how it looks like. So we just have here a generic, we have a generic account here. So you go into the subscription tab on your Hemlane dashboard. This is another way of doing it on the top left. You're going to select Eviction Shield from the drop-down menu, which shows here. In this case, it shows that little, you cannot evoke into Eviction Shield until you resolve pre-existing late rent payment. So that's what I was talking about in the previous slide with that $475 of the one-time services. If you have tenants that are already past late and they've been, let's say, late for 3 months, that's where you're going to use the one-time service instead of the Eviction Shield ongoing feature, because you have to get those resolved so then we can go ahead and jump in. But in this process, you're just going to click off that check mark. It'll show off as white if you have no tenants that are past due, and then it'll be added, and you can choose your billing cycle. If it's, let's say, monthly, it'll create I think a one-time payment during that monthly cycle up to the date of your billing date. If it's yearly, then it'll do the same thing except yearly. And so in this next slide, I'm just going to show how our tenant communication looks like and what that looks like on your end as an owner. So this is kind of a general little sneak peek, but you'll have the open request show up on, as I mentioned, in the services tab there, and it'll show up as an open request. So you can also go ahead and take a look at any previous requests you've had if you ever need to reference them back. Let's say you do end up going to court and they're like, hey, can we take a look at those, documentation and so forth? You can go ahead and click off in the eviction shield on the top there, look at your past requests, take a look at all the information that you might need. And then the open request will show up like this. You'll also get a notification on your dashboard once there's messages, just as I'm showing here. On the right side, it says 0 new messages. Once you have messages from us or an update from the tenant, that's where the messages will show. And how does that look like? So this is kind of an example. So this is an example of Colette. She's one of our coordinators there. So she'll be reaching out, like I mentioned earlier. There's messages with the mediator, that's between us, and then messages with the tenant where you can only read, and that's between us and the tenant, and the messages with the mediators between the owners and us. And so we'll provide you some sort of information. Like in this case, we're like, hey, we've started mediation with your tenants who are currently overdue. Sometimes owners will accept past due rent, let's say outside of Hemlane, and we won't be aware of that. So we'll throw in the message of there, hey, if you've accepted payment outside of us, let us know, and then we can close this one off. And so another example there, it'll show up on the left-hand side there as how much is past due, what the current status is. So for example, if we go to the final stage, it'll show up on your dashboard like, hey, you've entered the final stage of, let's say, the attorney referrals, or if we're in the mediation process, or if we have the rent, we'll track as well as the rent. So example, let's say past due rent is due on the 1st. We do some mediation with the tenant and they make payment on the next Friday on the 6th, let's say. We'll monitor that payment. So they'll submit the payment. Usually in most cases, it takes, 3 to 5 business days with the payment processing to be deposited into your account, depending on if it's instantaneous in some cases. And so we'll monitor that until you've received that payment, and then we'll close that off as completed because you've gotten those past due rent. And now for the next slide, just before we go into our Q&A time here, just some frequently asked questions in case those might come up for the question services. I figured I'd just go over them now to save some time. So how much does it cost for Eviction Shield? As I mentioned earlier, it's $4.95 per rental unit per month, and it's applied to all of them. So our Eviction Shield one-time services will be able to assist you even if you're not evicted or if you're not enrolled in Eviction Shield. And if you still like our assistant, there's both of those options. Can you help with lease violations? As I was mentioning earlier, at this time, we don't assist with anything other than non-payment of rent violations. Can I help if a tenant has already moved out? No. At this time, we don't help with that, and we also don't do any sort of rent collection once they moved out or work with agencies who do help with that. Can I enroll only one of my rental units into Eviction Shield? No, unfortunately, when you enroll, it enrolls all of your rentals into the program, not just one. And then can I enroll if I'm on the free trial? So you have to be an active customer to benefit from the Eviction Shield services. And then we have this cancellation fee, which in my history here with Hemlane hasn't been ever applied before. In most cases, we'll just waive it. But what happens if you cancel between the 6 months before and use the service? That's where you're charged the flat fee of the $475 for the Eviction Shield. And so that seldom ever happen if hasn't happened yet, but that's pretty just much if you have used our Eviction Shield services and you fully benefit from it and then you want to cancel before that 6 months, that's where that one-time fee will be applied. And now we'll go into our final section here. I know I went over a little bit of our time, but some questions for us. If you guys want to throw them in the chat, we'll help answer.
Generally looking at some of the questions. Again, I am California specific. I am Kendall Law. This QR code, if you're in California, sends you to my website where you can sign up for our newsletters where we send out information every month, as well as if you follow me on any of my social media platforms, I do short videos and give information related to landlord tenant and other laws in California. We do ADA compliance and civil litigation. The question is no, I don't do Northern California. It is not economically feasible for landlords to represent me because you'd have to pay for my travel time. And those are also very specific. I don't want to say limited, but we do just do Southern California. The average time for us to file is anywhere between 35 and 90 days. However, the ones that request jury trials and are more difficult, we're trying to prosecute within 6 months. Court availability is always a problem for us. We've gotten some more courtrooms available, more judges are doing these jury trials, so we're getting a little less backlogged on that. Another big delay for us is sheriffs. Sheriffs are taking 4 to 6 weeks sometimes. Somebody asked about suggestion for rent collection. We don't do rent collection after eviction. I know that some managers and property management companies send the rent ledgers directly to credit collection agencies. But we also do have referrals if the amount is big enough, attorneys that do help with collections for wage and garnishment, bank garnishments. There's a question on a Dana Point, Orange County property. You can always sell and tenant with in place. Orange County, Dana Point, I don't think has any specific rules. So technically you could do the eviction based on that 3-day notice to pay or quit, or do a 60-day notice to terminate without cause. I'd have to check, but I don't think Dana Point has any of those, as long as all the proper California state law disclosures have been given. So you could do that. Plus, a new owner could always do owner occupancy. Those are just a part of a negotiation process in the sale is, hey, I'll give you a concession or hold back an escrow enough for you to deal with the eviction after the transaction. And I think that those are only questions that I can answer.
Yeah, I can take over. I think the general question here is, can you guys see this video again online? So yeah, so this is all going to be, it's already recorded. So once we're done here, you guys will get an email with the actual presentation as well. I've put down my email as well if you have any specific questions or any specific, exceptions or questions about our services, or want to talk to, let's say, maybe a sales representative just about Hemlane or about our services. My email there is leon@hemlane.com. You can send me an email, I'll respond, as well as the video copy will be sent over usually within 1 to 2 days. And then if you have any questions about anything else specifically, like I said, Aileen put her QR code there so you guys can scan it and shoot her a message as well. Otherwise, we just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here today, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.